The grand amphitheater of the Galactic Archaeological Institute buzzed with excited chatter as scholars from dozens of species gathered for the most significant discovery presentation in centuries. Dr. Zethara, a renowned Voidian archaeologist with crystalline skin that shimmered under the chamber's lights, stood at the center podium beside a massive holographic display showing ancient stone tablets covered in mysterious markings. "Esteemed colleagues," Zethara began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 3 centuries studying dead civilizations, "what you see before you represents the greatest archaeological mystery of our time." These tablets were discovered in the ruins of Kepler 442b, a world that died out approximately 50,000 years ago. The hologram rotated slowly, revealing intricate symbols carved deep into dark stone. Each symbol appeared deliberate, purposeful, yet completely alien to every known language database in the galaxy. The markings seemed to follow patterns, with some symbols repeated at regular intervals, while others appeared only once or twice across the entire collection of 17 tablets. Professor Clixthon, a spider-like arachnoid scholar known for his expertise in ancient linguistics, raised one of his 8 arms. "The patterns suggest some form of communication system, certainly. But after running these symbols through every linguistic analysis program available, we found no correlation to any known language, mathematical system, or even artistic expression." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. Dr. Veltar, whose people had cataloged over 10,000 extinct languages, nodded her elongated head. "My team has spent months analyzing the frequency patterns, the positioning, even the depth of carving. Nothing matches any communication method we've encountered in 47 different species' historical records." "Which is precisely why," Zethara continued, her tone becoming slightly dismissive, "we must conclude that these are likely decorative in nature, perhaps religious symbols, or even random artistic expressions created by a primitive culture that had not yet developed true written language." The assembled scholars nodded sagely. It was a reasonable conclusion. After all, between the Voidians, arachnoids, plasma beings, and dozens of other species present, they represented the accumulated knowledge of nearly 3 million years of combined scholarly research. If they couldn't decipher these symbols, then surely they held no real meaning. In the back row of the amphitheater, almost hidden among the towering forms of his alien colleagues, sat Dr. Marcus Chen, the only human representative at the conference. His species was still considered relatively new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. Most of the other scholars barely acknowledged his presence, considering humans to be enthusiastic but ultimately primitive compared to civilizations that had been exploring space for millennia. Marcus leaned forward in his seat, squinting at the holographic display. Something about those symbols nagged at him, stirring a memory from his childhood on Earth. The patterns were familiar somehow, though he couldn't quite place why. As Zethara continued her presentation, explaining the various theories her team had developed about the symbol's decorative purpose, Marcus found himself counting the different markings. "The complexity of the carving suggests significant effort was invested in their creation," Zethara was saying. "This indicates they held importance to their creators, though likely ceremonial rather than functional. We believe they may have been part of burial rituals or religious ceremonies." Dr. Clixthon chittered in agreement. "The repetitive nature of certain symbols supports the ceremonial theory. Primitive cultures often relied on repetition in their religious practices." Marcus felt a sudden chill run down his spine. The way the symbols were grouped, the specific patterns of repetition, the careful spacing between different sets of markings. His mind raced back to elementary school on Earth, to long afternoons spent learning about ancient human civilizations. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice barely audible in the vast chamber. The presentation continued without pause. Zethara had moved on to discussing the metallurgy techniques used to create the carving tools, while several other scholars debated the possible astronomical significance of the tablet's arrangement. Marcus stood up, his movement finally catching the attention of a few nearby scholars who turned to look at him with mild curiosity. "Excuse me," he said louder, his voice carrying a strange mixture of excitement and disbelief. Zethara paused mid-sentence and looked toward the back of the amphitheater with barely concealed irritation. "Yes, Dr. Chen? Do you have a question about our methodology?" The condescension in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. Marcus felt the weight of hundreds of alien eyes upon him, most of them regarding him with the same polite tolerance they might show to a child interrupting an adult conversation. "Actually," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger as certainty filled him, "I think you might be wrong about these symbols being meaningless." A few scholars actually laughed out loud at this suggestion. Professor Veltar's translator device barely managed to convert her species' equivalent of amused snorting into something resembling laughter. "Dr. Chen," Zathara said with the patience of someone addressing a particularly slow student, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I assure you that these symbols have been subjected to the most rigorous analysis possible. Our combined expertise represents millions of years of scholarly advancement." Marcus took a deep breath. "What if they're not alien symbols at all?" The laughter grew louder now. Several scholars were openly giggling, their various forms of amusement creating a cacophony of alien sounds that the universal translators struggled to interpret. "Not alien?" Clixthon chittered incredulously. "Dr. Chen, these tablets were found on a world that died out 50,000 years ago. Your species barely learned to control fire 50,000 years ago." "That's exactly my point," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the laughter with unexpected authority. "These aren't alien symbols. They're human." The amphitheater fell silent. The sudden absence of laughter was more deafening than the mockery had been. Hundreds of alien faces stared at Marcus with expressions ranging from bewilderment to outright disbelief. The holographic display continued to rotate slowly, its ancient symbols casting dancing shadows across the stunned audience. Dr. Zathara was the first to recover her composure. "Dr. Chen," she said carefully, her crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lights in sharp, angular patterns, "I think perhaps the translation matrix is malfunctioning. Did you just suggest that these 50,000-year-old symbols are somehow connected to your species?" Marcus walked down the amphitheater steps, moving closer to the holographic display. With each step, his confidence grew stronger. The patterns were unmistakable once you knew what to look for. "Not just connected," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic design. "These are human numerals. Specifically, they're Roman numerals." The silence stretched longer. Professor Clixthon's 8 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme confusion among his species. "Roman numerals? I'm not familiar with this term." "Roman numerals are an ancient numbering system used by one of Earth's early civilizations," Marcus explained, stopping just meters from the holographic tablets. "They used combinations of letters to represent numbers, EVXLCDM1, 5, 10, 50, 100, 500, 1000. Dr. Veltar's translator struggled with the concept. "You're suggesting that these elaborate carvings are merely counting?" "Not merely counting," Marcus said, his excitement building as he studied the symbols more closely. "Look at the patterns, the way they're arranged, the groupings, the repetitions that Professor Clixthon mentioned. These aren't random decorative symbols. They're mathematical calculations." He pointed to the largest tablet in the display. "That symbol there, what your analysis marked as primary decorative element repeated 7 times. That's the Roman numeral for 1000. M. And those smaller symbols surrounding it, the ones you classified as supporting ceremonial markings, those are additions and subtractions." Zathara moved closer to her own display, her scientific curiosity beginning to override her skepticism. "Even if we accept your interpretation of these markings as numerical, Dr. Chen, the timeline makes your theory impossible. Your species was not capable of interstellar travel 50,000 years ago. According to our historical records, humans had barely developed agriculture by that time." "Our records show the same thing," Marcus agreed. "But what if our records are wrong? What if humanity was spacefaring much earlier than we thought and something happened? Something that forced us to start over?" The implications of his words rippled through the assembly like shockwaves. Several scholars began whispering among themselves in their native languages, their translation devices working overtime to keep up with the rapid exchanges. Professor Clixthon raised another arm. "Dr. Chen, this is highly speculative. Even if these symbols somehow resemble your ancient numbering system, it could be mere coincidence. The mathematical probability of 2 completely separate evolutionary paths developing identical symbolic systems is—" "What are the calculations?" Marcus interrupted. "Have any of you actually tried to solve the mathematical problems shown on these tablets?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Dr. Zathara consulted her datapad, scrolling through months of research. Our analysis focused on linguistic and cultural significance. We didn't approach them as functional mathematics, because we found no evidence that they represented numerical concepts. But you also didn't look for numerical concepts, because you assumed they couldn't be numbers, Marcus pointed out. It's a classic case of confirmation bias. You concluded they were decorative, so you analyzed them as decoration. Dr. Veltar spoke up, her tone cautious but intrigued. Suppose hypothetically we accept your interpretation. What would these calculations tell us? Marcus studied the holographic display more carefully, his eyes tracing the patterns of symbols across multiple tablets. The arrangements were complex, involving addition, subtraction, and what appeared to be more advanced mathematical concepts. Some tablets seemed to be working through geometric problems, while others showed what looked like astronomical calculations. I'd need time to work through all of them properly, Marcus said. But from what I can see immediately, these appear to be solving problems related to orbital mechanics, gravitational calculations, and stellar cartography, the kind of mathematics you'd need for interstellar navigation. The amphitheater erupted in excited chatter. This was no longer a simple archaeological presentation. It had become a potential rewriting of galactic history. If Marcus was correct, it meant that humanity had achieved space travel tens of thousands of years before any other known species, only to somehow lose that knowledge and fall back into primitive conditions. But Zathara raised a critical point that silenced the discussions. Dr. Chen, even if we accept that these are numerical calculations, and even if we stretch credibility to suggest they're human in origin, there's still one fundamental problem with your theory. She manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on one particular tablet. These symbols aren't just carved into the stone. Our analysis shows they were created using advanced plasma cutting tools, technology far beyond what any civilization possessed 50,000 years ago. The precision is perfect down to the molecular level. Even we don't have tools capable of this level of accuracy. Marcus stared at the enhanced image, seeing for the first time the incredible precision of the carvings. Each line was exactly uniform, each curve perfectly smooth. The technology required to create such markings was indeed beyond anything he knew existed. Unless, he said slowly, a new possibility forming in his mind. Whoever created these tablets wasn't working with primitive tools at all. The chamber fell silent again as the implications of his words sank in. If humans had been spacefaring 50,000 years ago, and if they had possessed technology advanced enough to create these precisely carved tablets, then what had happened to that civilization? Where had that technology gone? And most importantly, why had humanity forgotten its own incredible past? 3 days later, the Galactic Archaeological Institute's most advanced computational laboratory hummed with activity. Marcus sat surrounded by holographic displays showing dozens of the ancient tablets, their symbols now highlighted and cross-referenced with every Roman numeral variant in Earth's historical databases. The verification process had taken 72 hours of continuous analysis, but the results were undeniable. Dr. Zathara stood behind him, her crystalline features reflecting the blue glow of the displays. Her initial skepticism had gradually transformed into scientific fascination as the evidence mounted. "The pattern recognition algorithms confirm it," she said, her voice carrying a note of wonder. "Every single symbol on these tablets corresponds exactly to ancient Earth Roman numerals. The probability of this being coincidental is less than 1 in several billion." Professor Clixthon scuttled closer to examine the latest calculations, his 8 legs moving with nervous energy. "Dr. Chen, your interpretation of the mathematical problems is remarkable. These calculations are solving complex astrophysical equations. This tablet here appears to be calculating the gravitational effects needed to establish a stable orbit around a 3-star system." Marcus nodded, pointing to another display. "And this one is working out fuel consumption rates for what looks like an ion drive system. The efficiency calculations are actually more advanced than what we use today." He paused, running his hand through his hair in amazement. Whoever created these wasn't just doing basic mathematics. They were solving problems that required a deep understanding of advanced physics. Dr. Veltar approached the group, carrying a datapad that glowed with recent analysis results. "The metallurgy report has uncovered something even more extraordinary," she announced. The precision of these carvings wasn't achieved with any known plasma cutting technology. The analysis suggests the symbols were created using controlled matter manipulation at the quantum level. The implications hit the assembled scientists like a physical blow. Quantum-level matter manipulation was theoretical technology that even the most advanced galactic civilizations hadn't achieved. It was the kind of science that existed only in the most speculative research papers. "That's impossible," Zathara whispered. "Quantum matter manipulation requires computational power beyond anything we've ever conceived. The energy requirements alone would need the output of an entire star." Marcus stared at the enhanced images of the symbols, each line perfect down to the atomic structure. What if that's exactly what they had? What if ancient humanity had access to technology that we can't even imagine today? The laboratory fell silent except for the quiet humming of the analysis equipment. The evidence was mounting toward a conclusion that challenged everything they thought they knew about galactic history and human development. Professor Clixthon broke the silence. "Dr. Chen, I must ask the question we're all thinking. If your ancestors possessed technology this advanced 50,000 years ago, what happened to it? How does a civilization capable of quantum manipulation regress to using stone tools and living in caves?" "That's what we need to figure out," Marcus replied, his voice grim with determination. "But I think these tablets might tell us. Look at this sequence here." He highlighted a series of tablets that showed increasingly complex calculations. "These aren't just random mathematical problems. They're progressive, like someone was working through a specific engineering challenge." Dr. Zathara studied the progression Marcus had identified. "You're right. These calculations build upon each other. They start with basic orbital mechanics and progress through increasingly sophisticated problems involving multiple star systems, dark matter interactions, and something I don't recognize at all." Marcus pointed to the final tablet in the sequence, its symbols more complex and densely packed than any of the others. "This last one is different. The mathematics here goes beyond anything we understand. These aren't just calculations for star travel or navigation. These look like they're attempting to solve problems related to dimensional physics." "Dimensional physics?" Dr. Veltar's translator struggled with the concept. "As in travel between dimensions?" "Or worse," Marcus said quietly. "What if they were trying to prevent something from traveling between dimensions?" The weight of that possibility settled over the group like a dark cloud. If ancient humanity had possessed technology capable of quantum manipulation and dimensional physics, and if they had been using it to prevent something interdimensional, then what had they been fighting against? Professor Clixthon's compound eyes focused intently on the final tablet. "Dr. Chen, these final calculations, they appear to be incomplete. See here where the symbols simply stop? It's as if whoever was working on this problem never finished." Marcus examined the abrupt ending of the mathematical sequence. The symbols stopped mid-calculation as if the mathematician had simply vanished while working. Or they ran out of time to finish. Dr. Zathara activated another display, showing the archaeological context in which the tablets had been discovered. The excavation report noted that these tablets were found in what appeared to be a research facility. The entire complex showed signs of having been abandoned suddenly. Personal belongings were left behind, experiments were left running, and there were signs of hasty evacuation. Evacuation from what? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Unknown," Zathara replied. "The excavation team found no evidence of warfare, natural disaster, or disease. The facility was simply empty, as if everyone had vanished simultaneously." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. An advanced human civilization with quantum-level technology, working on dimensional physics problems, suddenly disappearing without a trace. The tablets represented their final calculations, their last desperate attempt to solve a problem they never had time to complete. "We need to solve the final equation," Marcus said firmly. "Whatever they were working on, whatever they were trying to prevent or escape, we need to understand it." Dr. Veltar looked uncertain. "Dr. Chen, if this civilization possessed technology beyond our current understanding, and if they failed to solve this problem, what makes you think we can succeed?" Marcus looked around at his alien colleagues, representing the combined scientific knowledge of dozens of advanced civilizations. "Because we're not working alone. Humanity might have been advanced 50,000 years ago, but they were still just one species. We have the accumulated knowledge of the entire galaxy. Professor Clixthon chittered thoughtfully. A compelling argument. If we pool our scientific resources, we might be able to complete calculations that a single species couldn't finish. But first, Zathara interjected, we need to understand exactly what happened to this ancient human civilization. These tablets represent the end of their story, but we need to know the beginning. 2 weeks after the initial discovery, Marcus found himself aboard the research vessel, Cosmic Endeavor, heading toward the dead world of Kepler 442b. The ship's crew was a mixture of species, but the research team consisted entirely of volunteers from the archaeological conference who had insisted on investigating the ancient human site personally. Dr. Zathara stood at the observation deck's massive viewing window, watching the brown and lifeless planet grow larger as they approached. The atmospheric readings are consistent with a world that suffered massive ecological collapse approximately 50,000 years ago, she reported. Whatever happened here, it was catastrophic and sudden. Marcus joined her at the window, studying the planet's scarred surface. Deep canyons carved through continents like wounds, and vast areas showed the telltale signs of having once been oceanic basins, now dry and cracked. It looks like the entire hydrosphere was destroyed. How do you lose all the water on a planet? Professor Clixthon scuttled over to their position, his multiple eyes reflecting the planet's brown surface. The preliminary scans show something even more disturbing. The planet's magnetic field is completely gone. Not weakened, not shifted, but entirely absent. That's virtually impossible through natural means. Dr. Veltar approached the group carrying a data pad showing the latest sensor readings. The excavation site is located in what was once a major metropolitan area. The underground research facility where the tablets were found appears to be part of a much larger complex. Our deep scans suggest the entire city was built underground. As the ship entered the planet's orbit, the full scope of the ancient civilization became apparent. Massive geometric structures buried beneath millennia of dust stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. This hadn't been a simple research outpost. It had been a thriving metropolis, hidden beneath the planet's surface. Why would they build everything underground? Marcus wondered aloud. Zathara consulted her instruments. Environmental protection, perhaps? If they knew their planet was going to become uninhabitable, they might have moved their civilization underground as a survival measure. Or they were hiding from something, Professor Clixthon suggested grimly. The landing party consisted of 12 researchers, including Marcus and the 3 senior scholars who had become his most devoted collaborators in solving the tablet mystery. As their shuttle descended through the thin atmosphere, Marcus felt a strange sense of coming home, despite having never been to this world before. The excavation site was larger than Marcus had imagined. The original archaeological team had uncovered only a tiny fraction of the underground complex. Massive corridors carved from solid rock stretched in every direction, their walls covered with more of the precise Roman numeral calculations. But now, with proper translation, the scope of the ancient humans' work became apparent. These aren't just research notes, Marcus said as he studied the wall carvings in the first major chamber. These are textbooks. Someone was teaching advanced quantum physics using Roman numerals as the mathematical foundation. Dr. Veltar ran her scanners over the walls, recording every symbol for later analysis. The educational progression is remarkable. The lessons start with basic arithmetic and advance through calculus, quantum mechanics, and into theoretical physics that we don't even have names for. As they moved deeper into the complex, the nature of the ancient civilization became clearer. This had been a society dedicated entirely to scientific advancement. Every chamber contained evidence of different research projects, materials science, energy generation, space-time manipulation, and dozens of fields that the galactic community was only beginning to explore. Look at this, Zathara called from across a vast laboratory chamber. These manufacturing bays were designed to work with matter at the subatomic level. They weren't just theorizing about quantum manipulation, they were mass-producing it. Marcus examined the manufacturing equipment, its design far beyond anything he had ever seen. The precision was perfect, the engineering elegant in its simplicity. This technology could revolutionize every aspect of civilization. Energy production, space travel, manufacturing, even medicine. Why didn't they share this knowledge with other species? Professor Clixthon had been examining a series of star charts carved into one wall. Perhaps they tried to. Dr. Chen, these charts show not just this star system but dozens of others. Many of them match the locations of current galactic civilization centers. They knew where other intelligent species were developing. The implications were staggering. Ancient humanity hadn't just achieved advanced technology in isolation. They had been aware of other developing civilizations throughout the galaxy and had been watching their progress for thousands of years. As they explored deeper, they found evidence of contact. Translation matrices similar to modern universal translators, communication arrays designed to reach across interstellar distances, and most remarkably, cultural artifacts from dozens of different species, including some that wouldn't achieve space travel for another 40,000 years. They were running a galactic monitoring program, Marcus realized. They were keeping track of every developing civilization in this entire region of space. But in the deepest levels of the complex, they found something that changed everything. A massive chamber filled with what could only be described as weapons. Not conventional weapons designed to fight other biological entities, but devices meant to combat something far more exotic. The weapons were built around dimensional anchor points, reality stabilization fields, and quantum disruption matrices. These weren't tools for fighting physical enemies. They were designed to battle entities that existed outside normal space-time. At the center of the weapons chamber, they found the final piece of the puzzle. A massive stone tablet, larger than all the others, covered in Roman numerals that formed the most complex mathematical equation Marcus had ever seen. But unlike the incomplete calculations they had found earlier, this one was finished. Dr. Zethara studied the completed equation with growing alarm. Dr. Chen, if I'm reading this correctly, this equation describes a method for permanently sealing dimensional rifts. They weren't just trying to prevent something from coming through from another dimension. They were trying to trap it there forever. Marcus felt the weight of 50,000 years of history settling on his shoulders, and judging by the fact that this world is dead and humanity forgot all of this technology, I think they succeeded. But the cost was everything they had built. Professor Clixthon's compound eyes focused on a final inscription at the bottom of the great tablet. Unlike the mathematical equations above it, this was written in Latin letters, not Roman numerals. A message meant to be understood by any future human who might find it. What does it say? Zethara asked. Marcus read the ancient Latin slowly, his voice heavy with the weight of his ancestors' sacrifice.
It says, "We have saved the galaxy, but we could not save ourselves."
The door is sealed, but the key is lost. May those who come after us never need to open it again. The discovery of the final tablet sent shockwaves through the galactic scientific community. Within days of Marcus's team transmitting their findings, research ships from every major civilization were heading toward Kepler 442b. The implications were too significant to ignore. An ancient human civilization had saved the entire galaxy from an interdimensional threat, sacrificing themselves in the process. Back on the research station orbiting the dead world, Marcus worked feverishly to decode the complete dimensional sealing equation. The mathematics involved concepts that pushed the boundaries of current scientific understanding. But with the help of the galaxy's finest minds, patterns were beginning to emerge. Dr. Zethara entered the main research laboratory carrying urgent news. Marcus, we've received reports from 17 different archaeological sites across the galaxy. Teams are finding similar underground complexes on dead worlds, all showing the same pattern of sudden abandonment 50,000 years ago. Professor Clixthon looked up from his analysis station, his 8 eyes blinking in sequence with excitement. It's even more extensive than that. We found evidence that ancient humans established monitoring stations in every sector where intelligent life was developing. They were running a galaxy-wide early warning system. Marcus paused in his calculations, the scope of his ancestors' achievements overwhelming him. They weren't just advanced. They were protecting everyone, even species that wouldn't evolve sentience for tens of thousands of years. Dr. Veltar approached the group with a datapad showing new translation results. We've decoded more of the educational inscriptions from the deep levels. The ancient humans weren't just monitoring developing civilizations. They were subtly guiding their development, ensuring that each species would eventually achieve the scientific knowledge needed to defend themselves. Defend themselves against what? Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer would be terrifying. Zathara activated a holographic display showing the dimensional ceiling equation. Based on our analysis of the mathematics, the interdimensional entities they were fighting weren't just hostile. They were antithetical to the existence of normal matter. Their very presence in our dimension would have unraveled the physical laws that allow life to exist. The weight of that revelation settled over the research team like a heavy blanket. Ancient humanity hadn't just saved the galaxy from conquest or destruction. They had saved reality itself from entities that would have made existence impossible. Professor Clixthon's mandibles clicked nervously. The energy requirements for sealing dimensional rifts on this scale would have been enormous. How did they generate that much power? Marcus studied the energy calculations embedded within the sealing equation. They used stars. Look at these numbers. They were somehow channeling the entire energy output of multiple solar systems into their dimensional anchors. That would explain why so many star systems in this region show signs of unusual stellar activity 50,000 years ago, Dr. Veltar noted. We always assumed it was natural fluctuation. But if the ancient humans were using stellar energy for their weapons, the pieces of the puzzle were coming together, painting a picture of a civilization so advanced that they could harness the power of suns to fight enemies from another dimension. But with that understanding came a disturbing realization. Zathara voiced what they were all thinking. If they succeeded in sealing the dimensional rifts, why did their civilization collapse? The energy expenditure was enormous, but it shouldn't have been enough to destroy their entire society. Marcus found the answer in the final equations, hidden within the complex mathematical relationships, because the sealing wasn't just about closing doorways. They had to sacrifice something to make the seals permanent. They tied the dimensional locks to their own quantum signatures. The horror of it sank in slowly. You mean they made themselves the key? Exactly. As long as ancient human quantum signatures existed in this dimension, the seals would hold. But to make sure the seals could never be broken, they had to ensure that those quantum signatures were completely erased from existence. Professor Clixthon's compound eyes widened with understanding. They didn't just sacrifice their civilization. They erased themselves from reality at a quantum level. That's why modern humans show no genetic connection to these ancient people, despite clearly being the same species. You're literally not the same humans who built all this. The implications were staggering. Somewhere in Earth's past, the original human civilization had voluntarily erased itself from existence, and somehow arranged for humanity to evolve again from scratch, carrying none of the memories, technology, or quantum signatures of their predecessors. Dr. Veltar's voice was filled with awe. They reset their entire species to ensure the galaxy would remain safe. That's the ultimate sacrifice. Marcus stared at the completed dimensional sealing equation, understanding now why his ancestors had left it carved in stone. They left this as a record, not just of what they did, but how they did it, in case it ever needed to be done again. The sobering thought hung in the air. If the ancient humans had gone to such lengths to seal away interdimensional entities, and if they had felt the need to leave instructions for recreating their sacrifice, then they must have believed there was a chance the seals might eventually fail. Zathara's crystalline features reflected the laboratory's lights as she studied the data from other archaeological sites. Marcus, there's something else. The monitoring stations we've found on other worlds all show the same thing. They were designed to automatically reactivate if certain conditions were met. What conditions? Dimensional instability readings that match the patterns from 50,000 years ago. She paused, her voice becoming grave. 3 of the monitoring stations have reactivated in the past month. The laboratory fell silent except for the humming of the analysis equipment. The ancient warning systems were coming online, which could only mean one thing. The dimensional seals were beginning to weaken. Professor Clixthon broke the silence with the question they all dreaded asking. How long do we have? Marcus ran the degradation calculations through the ancient mathematics, cross-referencing with the monitoring station data. The results made his blood run cold. Based on the rate of dimensional instability increase, the seals will start failing within the next 6 months. Complete breakdown will occur within 2 years. The galaxy's greatest scientific minds stared at each other across the laboratory, understanding the full weight of the situation. The interdimensional entities that ancient humanity had died to contain were going to break free, and this time, There were no advanced humans with quantum manipulation technology to stop them. So what do we do? Dr. Veltar asked. Marcus looked at the dimensional ceiling equation, then at his alien colleagues who had become trusted friends over the past month. We do what humans do best. We find a way to fight back no matter the odds. But first they needed to understand exactly what they would be fighting against. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the massive space station orbiting the neutral world of Sanctum Prime. Representatives from every major civilization filled the enormous chamber, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of the galaxy's intelligent species. But today, the usual political discussions were set aside for something far more urgent. Marcus stood at the central podium, feeling the weight of hundreds of alien gazes upon him. Behind him, massive holographic displays showed the ancient human tablets, their Roman numeral calculations now translated and understood. The evidence was undeniable, but convincing an entire galaxy to prepare for an interdimensional war was another matter entirely. Esteemed delegates, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics. 6 weeks ago, the archaeological community made a discovery that has changed our understanding of galactic history. But today I must share with you information that will change our future. Counselor Vextar of the Hegemony Alliance, an imposing figure whose people had dominated galactic politics for centuries, leaned forward in his hover seat. Dr. Chen, while the archaeological implications of your discovery are certainly fascinating, this is a session of the Galactic Council, not an academic conference. Why have you called for an emergency assembly? Marcus activated the first holographic display, showing the dimensional monitoring stations that had reactivated across the galaxy. Because in approximately 18 months, every civilization in this galaxy will face an extinction event that will make supernovas look like birthday candles. The chamber erupted in alarmed chatter as delegates processed this statement. Counselor Vexistar's metallic features showed skepticism. Dr. Chen, that's quite an extraordinary claim. I assume you have extraordinary evidence? I do. Marcus activated the next display, showing the dimensional ceiling equations and their degradation patterns. 50,000 years ago, an ancient human civilization discovered that entities from another dimension were attempting to break through into our reality. These entities weren't just hostile. Their very existence in our dimension would unravel the physical laws that allow matter to exist. Ambassador Krelak of the Silicon Collective, whose crystalline form chimed with harmonic frequencies, spoke up. You're describing theoretical physics. Dr. Chen, interdimensional entities are the subject of speculative science fiction, not legitimate threat assessment. Dr. Zethara stepped forward from the research team section. Ambassador Krelak, we have physical evidence. The ancient humans built weapons specifically designed to combat non-corporeal entities existing outside normal spacetime. We've examined these weapons. Their engineering is real, their purpose is clear, and their target was definitely not theoretical. Professor Klixthon scuttled to a secondary podium, his 8 legs clicking against the platform. The dimensional mathematics are consistent across 17 different archaeological sites. The ancient humans weren't fighting a war against biological entities. They were fighting reality itself to prevent it from being rewritten by forces that exist beyond our physical laws. Counselor Zarabeth of the Aquatic Federation, her water-filled environmental suit bubbling softly, raised a tentacle. Assuming we accept this interpretation of ancient events, Dr. Chen, what does this have to do with current galactic security? Marcus felt the weight of the moment. Everything depended on convincing these representatives that the threat was real and immediate. Because the seals the ancient humans created to contain these entities are failing, the monitoring stations they left behind are reactivating, detecting the same dimensional instabilities that preceded the original incursion. He activated a real-time display showing dimensional readings from across the galaxy. Red warning indicators pulsed at dozens of locations, their intensity growing stronger each day. 3 monitoring stations reactivated 6 weeks ago. 7 more came online last week. As of this morning, 23 ancient warning systems are active and detecting dangerous levels of dimensional distortion. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. These weren't historical curiosities. They were active threats developing in real time. General Thrakmar of the warrior clans, his massive form bristling with ceremonial weapons, stood from his position. Dr. Chen, warriors understand threats and responses. If these ancient humans defeated this enemy once, we can do so again. What weapons do we need to build? Marcus felt his heart sink as he prepared to deliver the most devastating news. General, the ancient humans didn't defeat the entities. They contained them, but only by sacrificing their entire civilization. They erased themselves from existence at a quantum level to power the dimensional seals. The weight of that revelation settled over the assembly like a funeral shroud. Counselor Vextar's voice was notably subdued when he spoke again. You're telling us that the only known method for stopping this threat requires the complete extinction of whoever implements it? That was the only method they could develop with their technology, Marcus clarified. But we have advantages they didn't have. We have the combined scientific knowledge of dozens of civilizations. We have technologies they never dreamed of. And most importantly, we have time to prepare. Dr. Veltar joined the presentation, carrying data pads with preliminary research results. We've been working around the clock to develop alternative approaches. The ancient humans were limited to working alone. With unified galactic cooperation, we might be able to find solutions they couldn't. Ambassador Krelak's crystalline form shifted colors, indicating deep contemplation among the Silicon Collective. What exactly would this cooperation entail, Dr. Chen? What are you asking of us? Marcus looked around the chamber at representatives of civilizations that had spent centuries in political rivalry, trade disputes, and territorial conflicts. I'm asking you to do something that has never been done in galactic history. I'm asking every civilization to share their most advanced scientific knowledge, their most classified research, and their most powerful technologies. We need to combine everything we know into a unified defense against an enemy that exists beyond the laws of physics. General Throckmar's laugh was more like a battle roar. Human, you're asking for total military and scientific integration across species that have been enemies for millennia. That's impossible, General, Marcus replied, his voice carrying the same determination that had driven his ancestors to sacrifice everything for the galaxy's survival. 18 months ago, scientists from every major civilization agreed that the tablets we found were meaningless decorations. Sometimes the impossible is just something we haven't figured out how to do yet. He activated the final display, showing projections of what would happen if the dimensional seals failed completely. The mathematical models painted a picture of reality itself unraveling, starting with the collapse of atomic bonds and progressing to the breakdown of space-time. The choice isn't between cooperation and independence, Marcus concluded. The choice is between working together or watching the universe end. The ancient humans proved that one species can save the galaxy. Now we get to find out what all of them can do working together. 14 months later, the massive orbital facility, designated Project Synthesis, hung in space above the ancient human homeworld of Kepler 442b. The station was the largest construction project in galactic history, built through the combined efforts of every major civilization. Its purpose was singular: to create a new type of dimensional seal that wouldn't require the extinction of its creators. Marcus floated in the station's central command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time dimensional readings from across the galaxy. The interdimensional intrusions were accelerating. What had started as minor distortions in space-time were becoming visible rifts in reality itself. They were running out of time. Dr. Zethara approached, her crystalline form now enhanced with Aquatic Federation bioluminescent modifications that allowed her to process calculations at incredible speeds. Marcus, the warrior clans have completed the final quantum resonance amplifiers. The Silicon Collective has finished programming the dimensional mathematics into their crystalline processing matrices. We're ready for the first full-scale test. Professor Clixthon scuttled over, his arachnoid form now augmented with technological enhancements from 6 different species. The energy distribution network is online. We're channeling power from 47 different star systems, including the same ones the ancient humans used. But our approach is different. Instead of one species powering the seals through self-sacrifice, we're distributing the energy load across every participating civilization. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of the galaxy's hopes resting on their shoulders. The past 14 months had seen the most unprecedented cooperation in galactic history. Ancient enemies had shared their deepest secrets. Rival civilizations had merged their technologies, and species that had never even met were working side by side. General Throckmar's voice boomed across the command center from his position at the military coordination station. All defensive fleets are in position. If the interdimensional entities break through during the sealing process, we'll hold them back as long as possible. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. The warrior clans, whose people had spent millennia perfecting the art of physical combat, were preparing to fight enemies that existed beyond the physical realm, but they had adapted, creating weapons that fired concentrated dimensional distortions and reality anchor projectiles. Ambassador Krelak's harmonious voice chimed from the Silicon Collective's processing center. Dr. Chen, our calculations show a 73% probability of successful dimensional sealing using the unified approach. However, there's still a significant risk of cascade failure if any one species withdraws their contribution during the process. Nobody's withdrawing, Marcus replied firmly. We've come too far and learned too much about what we can accomplish together. Dr. Veltar approached with the final technical reports. The monitoring stations are detecting massive dimensional instabilities. The seals are failing faster than our projections indicated. We need to begin the sealing process within the next 6 hours, or the rifts will become too large to contain. Marcus looked around the command center at representatives of dozens of species, all working together toward a common goal. The ancient humans had faced this threat alone and had been forced to make the ultimate sacrifice. But this time was different. This time the galaxy was united. Initiate the dimensional sealing protocol, Marcus commanded. Across the galaxy, the greatest scientific achievement in known history began to unfold. Quantum resonance amplifiers powered by the energy of stars sent coherent dimensional waves toward the failing seals. Reality anchor networks established by every major civilization created stable reference points in space-time. And at the center of it all, the combined mathematical knowledge of 47 different species worked together to rewrite the laws of physics themselves. The interdimensional entities fought back. Rifts tore open in space near several populated worlds, and creatures that defied description poured through. But they were met by the unified galactic defense forces, wielding weapons that combined the warrior spirit of the clans with the technological precision of the Silicon Collective and the biological adaptability of the Aquatic Federation. For 12 hours, the battle raged across multiple dimensions. Ships from every civilization fought side by side against enemies that existed partially outside reality. Scientists from species that had been enemies for centuries worked together to solve problems that no single civilization could have addressed alone. And slowly, impossibly, they began to win. The new dimensional seals weren't just patches over the old ones. They were fundamental restructuring of the barriers between realities, powered not by the sacrifice of one species, but by the voluntary cooperation of many. Each civilization contributed what they did best. The warrior clans provided raw determination, the Silicon Collective offered computational power, the Aquatic Federation supplied biological adaptability, the Voidians contributed their understanding of deep space, and dozens of others added their unique capabilities to the effort. As the final seal locked into place, Marcus watched the dimensional readings across the galaxy return to normal levels. The rifts closed, the interdimensional entities were contained, and reality itself was stabilized. But more importantly, the galaxy had learned something extraordinary about what was possible when different species worked together instead of against each other. Dr. Zethara floated beside him, exhausted but triumphant. The seals are holding. The dimensional barriers are actually stronger than they were before the original incursion 50,000 years ago. Professor Clixthon chittered with satisfaction, and unlike the ancient seals, these don't require anyone to sacrifice themselves to maintain them. They're powered by cooperation, not extinction. General Throckmar approached, his massive form somehow seeming less intimidating after fighting alongside former enemies. Dr. Chen, my people have a saying, strength is found not in standing alone, but in knowing who stands with you. Today, the entire galaxy stood together. Marcus smiled. Thinking about his ancestors who had faced this same threat 50,000 years ago, they had saved the galaxy through sacrifice, but they had been alone. This time, humanity hadn't stood alone, and neither had anyone else. The ancient humans left us more than just a warning, Marcus said, looking out at the stars that now seemed a little brighter, a little safer. They left us an example of what one species could do when they put the survival of others before their own interests. Today, we proved what all species can accomplish when they put cooperation before competition. The Galactic Archaeological Institute had started with scholars laughing at ancient symbols they thought were meaningless. It had ended with the entire galaxy working together to save reality itself. And at the center of it all were the Roman numerals of an ancient human civilization that had taught the galaxy its greatest lesson. Sometimes the most meaningful discoveries are the ones that teach us not about the past, but about what we can build together in the future. The scholars weren't laughing anymore. They were too busy marveling at what they had accomplished when they finally learned to work together.